When Assassin's Creed Rogue released over 10 years ago, at the time I thought it was pretty shit. But as I've been replaying and reviewing a bunch of AC games lately, and so many comments keep telling me that it's underrated, I felt I had no choice to pick it up again and see how well it holds up. This review will include some story spoilers, and with that being said, let's just jump straight on into it. Now the thing that really sets Rogue apart from other AC games is that you don't play as an assassin, you instead play as a Templar by the name of Shay Patrick Cormac. A cocky, brash Irish jokester who is in many ways similar to the AC franchise's previous protagonist Edward Kenway. The crux of this story is essentially that the North American assassins are hunting for old Isu temples and their relics, and upon disturbing these sites cause earthquakes and devastation across several cities. Because of this, Shay decides to leave the assassins and eventually joins the Templars, stopping the assassins from enacting their plans by killing almost every one of them. Now on paper, this sounds like it has the potential to be one of the strongest stories in the franchise, however the execution of it is definitely up for question, with in my opinion the story of AC Rogue being somehow the best and the worst aspect of the game. Shay's betrayal or defection is just written pretty badly. Shay goes from being nigh the best of friends with the assassins, but after one incident, the earthquake of Lisbon, an actual real historical event by the way, he turns his back on them in almost an instant. I think it would have made way more sense to have several examples of the assassins doing terrible deeds, making Shay slowly doubt them over time, rather than his leaving happening so abruptly. Whilst the pacing of the first act as an assassin and the middle act of joining the Templars feels pretty good, before you know it, various characters are saying, "Can you believe it's been a year already, Shay?" And then you're reaching the end of the storyline, which unfortunately feels pretty damn underwhelming. The whole story, by the way, only lasts around 10 hours, which for a fully fledged game and not an expansion pack, to me feels pretty short. One benefit of this game, being a prequel to Assassin's Creed 3, is that we do get to see some familiar faces. We have Adewale, a big character from Black Flag and protagonist of his own game Freedom Cry, Achilles, the leader of the Assassin Brotherhood and future mentor to Connor, although this game doesn't exactly paint him in the best light, and we get to see a slightly younger Haytham Kenway, who is one of my favourite characters of the whole franchise. If anything, if you haven't played both Rogue and AC3, I'd actually recommend you play Rogue first as it really helps with that game's setup. Some other side characters include Christopher Gist, our lovable first mate as a fun addition to a somewhat serious story, as well as Colonel Monroe who acts as a sort of softener to the Templars and comes across as a clear good guy character, and then we have new assassins such as Hope and even Chevalier, who is an assassin who keeps butting heads with Shay. However, because the game feels rushed, particularly the ending, we just don't have enough time with any of them. With our best friend Liam, a fellow Irishman and childhood friend of Shay's, there is supposed to be this huge ending with Shay eventually killing him, but because you only spend a few moments with Liam at the beginning of the game, and then see him only once at the end, you murdering him just doesn't hit as hard as it should. Even Shay joining the Templars, for example, we're asked, "Do you agree to hold up our principles until death?" but we're never actually told what the Templar principles are. The whole story just needed an extra 5 hours to really build its world and aid its character development. Whilst the supposed theme of this game is good and evil becomes totally blurred, the assassins ultimately are just portrayed as stupid, and there isn't any nuance within the game itself. It just feels like the Templars are now the good guys and the assassins are bad, and even AC3, which shows us some absolutely horrendous deeds the Templars undertake, I felt like that game actually better questioned and blurred the lines of morality. I wouldn't say the assassins are so evil such as say someone like Cesare Borgia, but their lack of care for achieving their goals, the actual deeds they're doing, is what makes this game so black and white. An example of dumb assassins is in one scene where they accidentally knock over an Isu relic because they're fighting amongst themselves, thus causing the cave to collapse. I actually laughed out loud at this point, which is never a great piece of evidence for a supposed serious toned story. There were some positives though for sure. I actually really like Shay as a character. He's constantly cracking jokes, confident, and also has a soft side to him too, and I absolutely love the fact we do have these old characters cropping up, as well as visiting previous locations seen in AC3 like Achilles' Homestead and New York. And of course, being an Assassin's Creed game, there are historical characters like Benjamin Franklin and George Washington dotted throughout, and from a time period and setting point of view, despite everything looking a little washed out colour-wise, I could not be happier. If you weren't aware, by the way, and this is something that many AC fans often resent, Rogue does have some correlation to AC Unity. You'll find yourself heading to Paris a few times within the game, with you in fact, and this is a pretty big spoiler coming in 3, 2, 1, being the Templar murderer of Arno's father. If you've never tried Unity, by the way, I've just replayed it and reviewed it before Rogue, so do check out my latest video to hear more of my thoughts about the correlation between those two games. We also haven't spoken about Rogue's modern day storyline, which just like Black Flag's, is not worth the light of day. This is again a faceless first person story which pulls you out of the storyline several times, basically just praising you on doing a good job working with Shay, explaining there is a virus in the server that needs fixing, and offering a hint of AC nostalgia with a few stupid puzzles scattered throughout. There is a side challenge of turning on computers to give you a reward, but personally, unless you're a completionist, I really would not bother. Finally, what I will say is that having just played AC Mirage recently where I thought the facial animations were pretty poor, considering that Rogue is now over 10 years old and built for the Xbox 360 generation, overall the cutscenes and facial animations are pretty impressive and add some serious weight and emotion to certain scenes. Granted, it wasn't always smooth, there was a moment where Adewale was sailing and then suddenly disappears, but overall I was pretty pleased. To conclude on our story though, whilst I like Shay as a character, I like older characters making a comeback and I really like the setting, it overall just feels rushed and the theme isn't executed well at all. It's a super interesting concept for sure, but it needs a hell of a lot of polishing and some writers who can actually blur the lines between good and evil, rather than just stating that assassins are bad now. Plus, whoever decided to include the phrase, "I make my own luck," 20 times within the game can go and hidden blade themselves. Now, as Rogue has copied a lot of the assets from Black Flag, this makes much of the gameplay incredibly similar. So instead of delving into all of the stealth, parkour and combat mechanics, I'm going to instead cover all of the changes and additions they made. But if you do want to hear more on this, you can of course watch my Black Flag review in the description. So, starting with stealth, and one of the biggest changes to the game is your brand new air rifle. Gone are the blow darts Edward used, replaced with a spanking new air rifle that means you can now send targets to sleep, make them berserk, or shoot firecrackers to distract people when needed. I have to say, I absolutely love this gun. It almost feels like a sniper rifle, and I found myself using this thing in almost every stealth scenario. But then later in the game we also get an upgrade to this gun in the form of a friggin' grenade launcher. This is granted very similar to the rifle, it has sleep and berserk bombs, but these have a wide area, meaning you can send multiple people to sleep or turn groups of people insane, as well as the addition of the shrapnel grenade for taking out large groups of enemies at once. Shay truly is the longest range fighter we've had so far, and it feels awesome. It reminds me that a World War I/World War II Assassin's Creed game could definitely work if Ubisoft ever did think about developing it. Another big change, and a very positive one at that, is the new enemy types known as Stalkers. These are essentially assassins who are hunting you, but you'll know when they're close as you'll start to hear a whisper. Using eagle vision, you can then locate them using a compass, but be careful not to get too close as that will make them pounce at you. I truly also love this new enemy as they act exactly like we would as an assassin, hiding in bushes, watching from rooftops and sneaking through crowds. This is something I actually wish had been carried over to future games, and it reminds you that you are now a Templar and the assassins want you dead. In terms of new additions, that's it. We have all the usual tools like rope darts, smoke bombs, even the ability to throw money on the ground, which is all useful stuff, but other than the gun, it's not like there's anything else to differentiate the fact that we are now a Templar. I'd also add that detection in this game to me can often feel kind of off, with guards spotting you from ages away even if you're behind cover, and I actually felt like detection was easier or more solidified in Black Flag. It's still a good stealth system though, and certainly better than those in the future RPG games. On to parkour now, and there is almost nothing to mention here that isn't in Black Flag. It's a fun experience. We have tree parkour like we've previously had, which is great, and whilst it's simple, Shay is agile, quick, and relatively responsive to your control. There were a couple tiny additions, the first being a quick climbing animation that happens in certain small towers or large tree trunks, as well as some roofs having some sort of scaffolding rope between them, allowing Shay to swing between buildings. Compared to Black Flag, I would say the parkour is maybe a tiny bit more buggy. It's difficult to tell, but occasionally Shay would glitch out or get stuck, particularly when trying to tree parkour or running across his ship. Whether this is just my imagination and Black Flag also had these issues, or it's because Rogue and Unity were being worked on at the same time, thus both not getting the polishing they deserved, I don't know, but overall, parkour in AC Rogue is exactly what you'd expect after Black Flag, and you will in no way, I think, be disappointed. Lastly, we move on to the combat, which again is nigh identical to Black Flag, but still very satisfying. There are some changes, including some great kill animations. Shay uses a sword and dagger as opposed to dual swords, and Shay also occasionally has to use a gas mask, which is a bit weird, but other than that, it's basically the same. My only comment would be that the few boss battles in this are always incredibly easy. In fact, so easy that there were times that I killed bosses quicker than I killed normal enemies. This was a shame because obviously the big highlights of a game are killing your former assassin brothers, so to end them in just a matter of seconds without any dialogue or cutscenes as you weaken them down feels like a great shame. Overall, I still really enjoy Rogue's combat, and in my opinion, the Kenway saga of AC3, Black Flag and Rogue, with 3 being the strongest, gives us the most fun combat experience in any AC game. And by the way guys, if you are enjoying this video so far, then as always, a like, a comment and hitting that subscribe button goes a super long way to helping out my channel. Cheers. Now AC Rogue, similar to AC3, takes you across North America, and rather than one large Caribbean map like in Black Flag, the sailing section of the game is now split between the River Valley and the North Atlantic, with a large New York City map essentially copied from AC3. We even have a few brief stints in Paris and Lisbon throughout the game too, so there is definitely plenty to explore in this game. Whilst granted, the location certainly isn't as beautiful or vibrant in colour as Black Flag's, and the map is a little smaller too, I actually really still love this setting. I think the biggest positive is that it feels pretty varied, taking you through cities, large and small towns, masses of open ocean, small islands, forests, snow-ridden peaks, and even showcases some shots of the northern lights in the background. The Atlantic has icebergs, shipwrecks, harpooning targets, blizzards, tornadoes, and our huge naval battles, with the River Valley being much more enclosed, still having naval battles but on a smaller scale, also with some fun forest gameplay, running through trees, etc., all of which you have to navigate rough winds and tough weather. And whilst New York is simply a city, it's alive with NPCs, fun to revisit locations Connor has yet to go to, and experience the standard city setting of Assassin's Creed. And despite its age, being originally produced for the Xbox 360, it all looks pretty great too. Whilst the story I've said is only 10 hours, there is so much to explore and collect, with all of the side content, which we'll speak more on later, adding a further 30 hours to the game. In terms of collectibles, we've Animus fragments, Viking swords, Templar maps, native pillars, cave paintings, war correspondence letters, and blueprints being the final upgrades for our ship, the Morrigan. This is all really great because the main storyline in general doesn't push you much to explore, with missions only touching on a handful of locations. So it's good that there are incentives to ensure you do actually go and visit these places. One aspect, by the way, that adds so much to this game's exploration is that the music is always on point. Yes, whilst again, it's another aspect similar to Black Flag, it has an Irish folk feel and darker twist that suits the setting really well. The version of Ezio's family in this game is also really great, and like all my AC reviews, you're currently listening to Rogue's soundtrack and will continue to throughout this video. So of course, with the success of Black Flag and the largely positive feedback from fans absolutely loving the pirate life, AC Rogue has done the same, but dare I say it, bigger and better. In fact, if you weren't a fan of sailing in Black Flag, then I genuinely would suggest you don't purchase Rogue, as sailing accounts for literally 50% of your playtime in this game. Whether that's travelling to your next conversation or fighting along the open seas, you best strap in for a massive pirate sailing experience in your own ship called the Morrigan. Whilst yes, like most of the game, they've copied and pasted all of the ship mechanics over from Black Flag, they've also added some pretty big changes too, starting with something called the Parkour gun. This is a quick-firing, low-damage weapon which lets you take out smaller ships with ease, as well as targeting larger ships' weak points. It also means that when boarding enemy ships you don't actually have to board, instead you can just kill your enemies from across your ship, just saving you a bit of time. This is an adaptation from the previous slow-firing swivel gun in Black Flag, and an addition that I greatly prefer. They've also removed the exploding barrels from Black Flag, and instead we can now use burning oil from our rear to set the sea on fire, essentially melting any ship that's trying to tail or ram us. Not only can the larger ships now ram you, they can also board you too, evening the odds between you and other vessels. The final addition includes our own ram for smashing straight into enemy ships, but also being in the North Atlantic, it perfectly suits the Morrigan for clearing icy seas too. In fact, being in the cold sea means you will encounter icebergs, which you can blow out of the water, creating waves and damaging small ships. Now, on top of these new gameplay mechanics, we have a new wanted system as well, where the more ships you destroy, you'll eventually be hunted by bounty hunters, offering you a greater challenge and some extra rewards too. This of course just aids to the whole you are a Templar and being hunted scenario, and while sometimes it was a bit annoying, seeing that red ship coming at me in the distance adds a fun new dimension and a threat to your game. I have to say, I actually think they've balanced out this naval experience and made it really damn challenging. I got desynced several times while sailing throughout my playthrough, particularly when trying to take on various legendary ships, which is one of the larger and most fun pieces of side content, offering massive naval battles between your own fleet and the enemies. Yes, in Rogue you have your own fleet, where after defeating and boarding an enemy ship, you'll have the option to repair your own, salvage the enemy ship for money, or add it to your fleet. This actually aids to the weird minigame within Rogue 2, where you essentially send out your own ships to complete contracts, whether that's sending men somewhere for some mission, transporting goods, whatever reason given. There is still a large upgrade system for the Morrigan 2, allowing you to customise to suit your own playstyle, as well as of course being able to change the appearance of your ship, largely your sails, which all look pretty great. Overall, naval combat and exploration can feel a little repetitive, the map itself feels absolutely huge, and there are endless enemies for you to take out as you travel, and towards the end of the game I did find myself avoiding combat rather than seeking it out. Despite that though, I actually think the sailing element of AC Rogue is probably the best aspect of the whole game. All of the new gameplay mechanics are great and somehow improved on the already fantastic Black Flag, it's more balanced and actually challenging, and one thing I haven't mentioned is that the sea shanties of course have made a return too. If you were a fan of the pirate life in Black Flag, then I can safely say that Rogue will not disappoint you.
Howdy lay back, take in your stack, think and turn around to Captain Leave a pole.
Now, other than the naval aspects, we haven't really spoke about how we'll be spending our time in game. Your main task is of course assassinations, many of them across large wide areas filled with guards, with a lot of the main missions often being quite decent set pieces. Now, the obvious mission that stands out for everyone is escaping a falling Lisbon, which granted is wonderful, but there are also other fun set pieces too, like tailing a ship on foot, or completing a climbing puzzle with serious consequences. There are of course the usual tailing missions within the game, parkour chases, defending your allies or straight up combat situations, absolutely everything you'd expect from an Assassin's Creed game, and whilst I actually really liked the main missions, there are only 6 sequences with roughly 4 missions each, so before you know it, your main missions have come to an end. I'd add too, whilst largely I think this game is pretty polished, there were occasional moments of finishing missions in ways the games might not expect you to. For example, in one mission I was taking part in a chase, which is how it's meant to be played, however annoyingly failed it the first time. When I reloaded back in, I simply shot this chap in the back straight away and avoided the chase altogether. These small problems can also be found in the optional mission objectives too, where most of these side requirements are a nice small challenge alongside your main objective, but I'm sure some are actually impossible to 100%. None of this is game breaking at all, but let's just say a few more playtests could have ironed out some of these sequences. Outside of your central objectives though, the large chunk of your time will be spent clearing out assassin gang strongholds or French outposts. This is of course reminiscent of previous games, where you kill certain targets and take over areas, and I do like this, I always have, but like anything it can get repetitive. Killing the assassin gang leaders too, which is a new addition from Black Flag, is often more painful than enjoyable in my opinion, as they take loads of damage and just constantly run around and hide in haystacks. Your other piece of side content includes assassin interceptions, a play on your previous missions where instead of straight up assassinating a target, you're still doing that, but you're assassinating an assassin who's out on some quest, potentially saving someone in the process. Taverns also offer some side content too, so once you've beaten up the local thugs, the barkeep can give you information about where supplies are, but you can also then play checkers to earn some extra money, as well as a similar game called Nine Men's Morris, which was totally new to me, but from a single attempt made me never want to pick it up again.
Nope.
Continuing on from Black Flag, you can also hunt animals in this game, including sea creatures via harpooning, but there's no real tutorial for it, and there's almost no need to do it either, as whilst it does give you materials for crafting, it's largely unnecessary as Shay to me already feels strong enough. I feel the same way about buying new weapons in Rogue 2, just like I did in Black Flag. You don't really feel the difference between owning the most basic sword or one you can get later on. And finally, like previous games, you're able to renovate buildings to bring yourself in some side income, which as always is something I've never understood. Why would an assassin turned Templar want to start owning property? But hey, if you're so inclined, it's there. The weird thing about Rogue's side content is that it's actually devoid of any official side missions. Sure, yes, there is a lot to do that I've just mentioned, and that excludes all of the collectibles dotted around the map too, but there are no side set pieces as it were. It's mainly just clearing areas or assassinating assassins. There are no, for example, homestead type missions like in AC3, which were a great piece of side content. I also think personally that the actual time spent in game is a little strange. We're playing as a Templar, not as an assassin, but our goals and missions don't actually change. You're still murdering everyone in sight and tackling the same sort of objectives. It's just the locations and the characters that have changed. I'm truly not knocking the game's content. There are some good set pieces and the grind of the game is definitely enjoyable. It's just everything we've already seen before. Now, you likely know this, but I'll say it anyway. The reason AC Rogue is considered the dark horse of Assassin's Creed is because it released on the same day as Assassin's Creed Unity, but for previous gen consoles. This meant that back in 2014, most people could only afford one game, and the allure of a brand new system with next gen graphics meant that most people played AC Unity, so Rogue never really had its chance to be a success out of the gate. However, I do truly believe, having now replayed it in 2025, this is 100% an Assassin's Creed game worth playing, and actually, at the time, given the horrendous launch Unity had, this was the game that you should have played first. The naval aspects in Rogue are absolutely brilliant, and in my opinion, even better than what we had in Black Flag, with the game's combat, parkour, and stealth in particular being solid, still largely a copy from our previous game, with it just not being quite as polished, but with some fun additions that make it worth playing. Granted, Rogue does feel like a cheaper version of Black Flag, where almost everything just isn't quite as good. I don't know if this is down to the setting and the colour scheme, but the graphics, despite being set on maximum, don't look as clean, and I definitely encountered a few more bugs throughout my playtime than its predecessor. However, Black Flag is an incredible game, so I almost think that it's understandable that Rogue doesn't quite live up to it. After all, most sequels are never better than the original. Rogue to me just screams unseen potential. Whilst the idea is great, the execution is sadly good at best, and the theme of playing as a Templar just doesn't shine through enough. This is essentially just another Assassin's Creed game with new targets, but if you like AC3 and Black Flag and want more, then Rogue will not disappoint you. I actually feel bad that in my AC rankings video from last year, I put Rogue in last place, whereas now I think it's around the lower mid area of the 13 mainline games, and by the way, you can go and watch that video now. Do consider hitting that subscribe button as it really helps my channel out, and I will catch you legends in the next one. Until then.